We're back with Roger McNamee, tech investor and venture capitalist. He's made a lot of money for himself and others by spotting tech trends early, investing in the likes of Facebook, but he's recently become a leading voice for the tech reform movement. His book, Zucked, is out in paperback February 3rd. It's a great read. You are here on a very special day because it's also Apple earnings coming out after the bell.
It's also Global Data Privacy Day.
Oh, it is also global.
Of all days.
It's probably Infrastructure Week as well.
Probably.
We're not
right.
sure. But we know for sure that coming up soon, we're going to hear from Tim Cook and company. And you kind of separate Apple out.
I do.
As being much better than Facebook and Google. Are they really, though, that much better?
So what we need to distinguish, Jen, is the difference between, privacy and other issues. Mm-hmm. So I have real concerns about labor practices of all American tech companies in China. I think Apple's making a genuine effort to do better on that, but I think there is legitimate criticisms there. I think there can be room for criticism about some of the policies in the App Store. So I don't want to sit there and say to you, everything Apple does is great. But in privacy, everything Apple does is great relative to everybody else, and the gap is so big now. So I recently got an Apple Card, which is their credit card. When you pair that with Apple Pay, it's in many cases like paying with cash. And that is a huge difference in the credit card market. And when you have facial recognition for Face ID, the photograph never leaves the phone. If you use Apple Maps, they don't store any of your past routes. And these things are designed to protect your privacy. There is a cost, there is a friction there because there is convenience in having them have all that stuff. But what people don't realize is that Google knowing literally everything about you means that your search results are tuned not just to what they know about you, but to their ad inventory. They're just trying to drive you towards the behavioral predictions that they've sold to advertisers. And we view Google and Facebook as honest brokers when we're looking at the news feeds or search results, or even Amazon. And I got news for everybody. That is definitely not true. And that's the thing that we perceive that we aren't being harmed. Right. But what we don't perceive is that our choices are being narrowed, and that every time they're using AI, they're driving us to the point where at some point in the future, we'll all be wearing exactly the same clothes. We'll all be using the same form of transportation, eating the same food, because in their mind, the most important value on earth is efficiency, which if you're an engineer making a motor or something, that's true. But at the societal level, we're based on Enlightenment values like self-determination and democracy, which are inherently inefficient. Each of us making our own choices is inefficient, but that's good, right? But that's not how Google and Facebook see it, and that creates the problem.
We'll all be wearing the Amazon coat, which I guess a lot of people are already doing. I don't know if you know about the Amazon coat, but anyway, to go back to Facebook for a second and to come up with the idea of that Global Data Privacy Day, which every day is a day. I can't remember who here coined that. We had on the chief privacy officer at Facebook on my show earlier today, and we tried to sort of suss out what Facebook is changing, because they announced some changes today, increased controls over your privacy, which appeared to amount to, at least in part, deciding what you are served when you're on Facebook. So I don't know exactly how that helps your privacy. So do you think Facebook has made any progress when it comes to these types of privacy controls, all of the lip service or real stuff that they have said they're going to change?
Julie, if I asked the question as of last week, I would have said on a net basis they had regressed quite dramatically, that the changes they've made, particularly around democracy and elections, have been substantially negative. They've done a few superficial things that don't actually help, like the ad database. But when they decided not to fact-check campaign ads, that was a huge step backwards. I think this new thing has a potential to be constructive. Does it fix the problem? Not even close. But anytime they give you more visibility on who's doing what, I mean, the thing that journalists have done a great job of, particularly the last 6 months, is exposing this massive ecosystem in people's data. For a long time, we thought we gave up a little data for great service. What we didn't realize was every time we touch the digital world, whether it's a financial transaction, a purchase in retail, transportation like taking a flight, using your phone, therefore your location, healthcare stuff like prescriptions and tests, and anything you do moving around the web, all of that data is for sale. And these guys buy it all so that the data voodoo doll they have of you maybe 1 or 2% of it is the data they collect from you, and the rest of it is stuff they acquire by relentlessly tracking you or acquiring data. And what Facebook's doing is giving you visibility on some of the people they do business with, where it's going out from them or coming in from them. And that has to be a positive. And I would encourage every single person tonight, in commemoration of World Privacy Day, go in there and turn all those things to zero.
Yep. As I register for wedding stuff, I realize that I am now a product of the internet. Perhaps the most valuable product of the internet.
I don't know if you saw, but there was an antivirus product, right? That when you have an antivirus product, it knows literally everything about you, and they were selling it all to anybody. And it's like, it should be a scandal, but there's a little bit of news in Washington right now that makes it hard for these stories to break through.
Indeed. I want to talk about another network that we haven't touched on yet, and that's Twitter, because they've gone a different route than Facebook when it comes to their use of data privacy. But you've talked a lot about kind of the AI and the way the tightness of those loops creates these weird experiences for all of us online. And I think Twitter is particularly adept at creating a force field around what you see and what happens. Yeah. What do you make of where Twitter sits in this whole thing? Because in some ways I get a pass, in other ways they're the biggest culprit.
No, that's right. I mean, the thing that's unique about Twitter is they really only have 3 audiences, but they may be the most important audiences on earth. Government officials, journalists, and celebrities, right? And those 3 audiences are so influential, and they live in Twitter. So Twitter's policies matter. So Twitter's unwillingness to enforce its own terms of service on President Trump has allowed President Trump to do things like what he did last week with Adam Schiff, which amounted to a threat to a sitting congressman from the President of the United States. And that's, that sort of behavior by Twitter is awful. Now, Twitter's gone in and said they're not, they're going to really restrict political advertising. Now, Twitter doesn't have that much political advertising, so the cost to them is low. But what I would really like to see them do is to enforce their terms of service on everyone and to recognize that it really isn't suitable to have a different set of service terms for politicians than you have for everyday people. I mean, if I did anything like what President Trump does, I'd be banned for sure. And, maybe not forever, but they have a thing called Twitter jail. And, I think that would be healthy for everybody if they actually followed through on that. But this stuff's tough because you can't ban political advertising on social entirely without killing grassroots fundraising for people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, right? You'd rather have that than dark money and PACs, right? Yeah. So you have to find a path through these things.
Well, and I guess that gets to another kind of dynamic of this you've discussed, which is that the folks who work at these companies, they're just like, they went there and they're like, I'm going to work at a company. They didn't think they were going to be bad actors, and they might not be malicious in their intent. And it makes me think of enforcing the terms of service, where these are folks who maybe didn't realize they'd be the ethical arbiter of how the president communicates. And do you think the companies are better understanding their role, or do they continue to punt aggressively?
I think the situation's actually tougher than you described, because it was entirely possible only a few years ago, say early 2016, to view going to work at one of those companies as, I'm going to work at these ethically based market leaders who are making the world a better place. So idealism was actually, I think, a core value at these companies. And the recognition that the business model, the algorithmic amplification, the micro-targeting, and the enforcement of opt-out rules for privacy, those things have conspired to allow all of these bad problems to occur. And employees have been very slow to recognize it because they've been trained from day one that their mission is more important than anything else. And
we have seen some employees stand up at
well,
some
that's what's cool about
I mean, at Google, right, there were people who stood up about the government contracts. At Amazon, now we're hearing about some activism on climate change.
Yes.
Do you think that we're going to see more? I don't recall any instances at Facebook itself.
Facebook,
some releases of internal meetings.
Right.
And there was a petition that was signed and publicly released relative to the change in policy on fact-checking advertising. So, Julie, absolutely correct. So it started first at Google with Maven, which was a defense contract. Then there was and that was a small protest, but it was visible. There was a small but very visible protest to the censored search engine for China, which was called Dragonfly. And then you had the walkout over forced arbitration for cases of sexual misconduct. And that was a very much an internal thing. That was affecting the employees, not the... So if you think about it, none of those things are issues related to the protection of users. So at Facebook, you're exactly right. The problem at Facebook was in Myanmar, they were accused by the UN of enabling an ethnic cleansing. And you don't hear a peep. You know, clearly their products were used to broadcast the terrorism in Christchurch. Nobody protests against that. But now they do protest against the political thing, which I think is arguable the first time any of these platforms have had a protest on something that related to society. I consider that incredibly hopeful. No one has more power to affect change than the employees of these companies. And I want to encourage them. I've said from the beginning of this thing, and I say this over and over in the book, these are not bad people. They have a business model that they got to one little bit at a time and found themselves suddenly on the wrong side of a line. You know what? From my point of view, I get that. Welcome back. I want to help them. I want to help all the employees fix this because these products should be great.
It is a good read. There's lots of stuff in there. You have lots of recommendations about what the government can do and what people can do. You don't use an Android phone.
No.
More details.
The Apple phones really are a huge benefit, and I'd encourage everybody, next time you get a phone, make sure you're on an iPhone.
That's a deep tease for Apple earnings.
That's right. They're coming up
after the bell. Roger McNamee is the author of Zucked, Waking Up to the Facebook Catastrophe. It's out in paperback on February 3rd.